Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man who was the first person to ever be caught for a Freudian assassination. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who personally trained his superego to silently and effectively eliminate his id.
That's ridiculous.
That is a deep psychological cut.
It's a good setup for our guest today.
It's almost like I did it on purpose, Garrett.
Almost.
And that's because we have psychological extraordinaire, man of God, Dr. Robi Sonderegger, two-time guest on the Impossible Life Podcast with us again. Dr. Robi, good to see you again, man.
Two-time guest, woohoo! I finally made it to the big league.
Yeah, definitely put that as your LinkedIn profile. You're going straight to the top. You know, we've seen it before. So Dr. Robi's been on here before, and you talked to us about gratitude. I will tell you that that's still one of Garrett's favorite things when you talked about how...
I've referenced it probably a dozen times on the podcast of gratitude is cycle power for your brain.
He did it on Tuesday at the Bible study. Like, gave you the stress. So, like, I hope your ears were burning. Because that was like, when you said it, he was like, oh, so good. So, no pressure, but we're expecting some great one-liners on this episode, Dr. Robi.
All right.
So for those who did not listen to the first episode on gratitude, this is being recorded just before Thanksgiving in America. So you should go back and listen to that. I think it was a couple of years ago now at this point. And I'll actually link to that in the show notes. But in case you didn't know who Dr. Robi Sonderegger is, Dr. Robi is an internationally recognized clinical psychologist whose missional mandate is to equip and empower the body of Christ and raise up next generation leaders. As a keynote speaker, organizational consultant, and policy advisor over the past 25 years, Dr. Robi has become known for taking psychology from the front line to the home front. He works with churches, governments, humanitarian organizations, educational institutions, and corporations around the world. Over the past decade, his presentations and empowerment programs have reached literally millions of people. You recently passed 2 million, didn't you, Dr. Robi?
Yeah, 2.5 million.
Unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Congratulations. In over 40 nations. So his teaching is the best of Bible and biology, illustrating how science confirms and validates Scripture. And I just love that. I think you have such a unique gifting of having such deep clinical psychology background and being so rooted in the Bible. You're just one of the favorite people we get to listen to at Elevate Life and just in general.
That's for sure.
So just to finish up your bio, because, you know, when you've accomplished as much as you are, it takes 3 paragraphs. The breadth of Dr. Robi's work ranges from being a private consultant to the head of state to humanitarian ambassador and rehabilitating survivors of war, sexual exploitation, and natural disaster. And that's like a trifecta. He's authored several evidence-based empowerment curriculums that have been translated into numerous languages. I've seen them myself. They're amazing. His culturally sensitive programs are currently being utilized across 6 continents, and he's published in both peer-reviewed international scientific journals and in popular press. And oh, by the way, he lives in Queensland. He's the father of 5 children, passionate about marriage, family, and mental health. And I can say he's an all-around phenomenal guy just to sit and have a cup of coffee with.
Yes.
So
I think you forgot a few things, and he's 83 years of age. He's lived 3 lives. He's and it's all fake. It's all fake news. He just loves to promote his own ego, and bring it on.
he actually cloned himself recently successly, and that's how he accomplished all that. No, it's what you're doing is amazing. I remember last time, and as I've gotten to know you, first of all, I feel very fortunate that I've gotten to know you better, and second of all, just like the work that you do is unbelievable. I mean, you think about, for most people out there, one of the worst feelings is if someone comes to you and they have a really difficult problem and you want to help and you have no idea what to do. And you deal with some of the most like extreme cases of war-torn nations and sex trafficking and just awful, the ugliest sides of humanity. And your whole philosophy is that you can grow through what you go through. And I just love how you bring people through that practically. You can speak to that better than I can, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it's not a sob story, it's a success story. So when we get to take raw lumps of clay and start to mold it and shape it into what it could be, or like a painting, it looks like a mess at the beginning, but after a while it starts to take place and shape and form and color and vibrance, and now you can see a picture, and that makes it all worth it in the end. And so it's a great honor and privilege. I'm so grateful to be a part of what we do around the world.
Well, in that sense, you are a fantastic painter.
Yeah. Eat your heart
Abstract
out there,
abstract art, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hey, we know it worked for Picasso, so why not for you? So, anyways, we're gonna get into. So you're so uniquely qualified. Thank you for coming on again, too. By the way, we're so grateful for your time.
Oh, my
It
pleasure.
just
I'm excited for what you guys are talking about today because even though you've just been talking about all these, exploits on the front line, I'm equally as passionate about taking psychology from the front line and bringing it to the home front because that's where the coalface is. And so I love
Yes.
this topic that we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, let's dive into it. I had the privilege of talking to you about some of this, but there's much of this I'm just looking forward to learning from you as always, and I will 100% listen to this multiple times because you have such a just unique insight into this. So just to lay the foundations, because we had a conversation about the foundational elements for mental health and emotional well-being, and you just obviously bring an amazing deep knowledge. So what are those three foundational elements for mental health and emotional well-being?
Well, there's multiple pillars for mental health, and the thing is, we all know what we're supposed to do. You don't need a psychologist to come along and say, eat well and sleep well and exercise well and socialize well and renew your mind, have healthy thoughts, and make sure your morals and your manners are in check as well. And so we all know what the foundational pillars are, but all too often we can't actually keep them standing because the foundation upon which they stand are jeopardized. And so those foundational elements, three things, are identity, purpose, and values. So we need to be able to ultimately ask and answer the question, who am I? Why am I here? And what am I worth? And if I can answer those three questions, they are foundational. And then I'll be able to put all of the pillars into place that uphold the roof of mental health and emotional well-being.
I mean, how many people do you actually talk to that can answer those questions realistically?
Well, it's interesting because even if you go into church circles and you were to say, what's your identity? People might be able to tote like a good Christianese line, like, I find my identity in Christ, which is fantastic. But when you press a little deeper and say, well, okay, so what does that mean? I'm so surprised as to how people struggle, with hand and foot trying to answer that. Well, I find my identity in Christ. Well, he is, well, and the long and the short of it is, it's not just who I am, it's whose I am. Who do I
Yeah.
belong to? Who's my tribe? And if I can find my identity in something that's bigger than me and bigger than my external characteristics, 5'7", blonde hair, blue eyes, instead of those types of things, if I can start to forge and form my identity based on the values of Christ, that those inner core convictions, well, then I become a force to be reckoned with. Now I start to speak a different language. I start to engage a different culture. I belong to a different kingdom, and so I form a different identity.
No, I love that, man. So, because we are focusing on parenting, I mean, so foundational elements of identity, purpose, and values. What part do parents play each of those elements?
Well, parents actually play different roles. And so, the stereotype is that mum is the nurturer and dad is, well, he's just the danger. And I'll often use an example. If I walk into a room and I see my kid sitting on the back of a dog with, one, tuft of hair in one hand and the other hand in the air, like, Texas full-on ride 'em cowboys, I'll be like, come on, see if you can stand for 10 seconds, 9, 8. Now, if the mum walked in the room, she would immediately say, get off the dog. Now, of
Right.
course, animal, protection and all the rest of it. But we're afraid of the danger that might be done to the child and then to the furniture as well when the child eventually and inevitably will come off that dog. But the dad is like, come on, you've got this. But of course, the head does fly into the wall. The dog runs away. The child is now in tears. And so I open my arms and the child runs right past me straight to mum. And I'm like, hang on, what's up with that? I was the one cheering you on. So the child goes to mum for nurture, but often encouraged with adventure and danger with dad. And dad actually plays an important role in helping to fashion and form identity. And that's key. So when we see some of the statistics of single parent households, single parents are amazing because they do the very best that they can, trying to do swap hats and do the job of two different people and do their own, workplace job as well. But we just see from the statistics that, well, sexual promiscuity goes through the roof, academic goes into decline, incarceration goes up, like all of the metrics are terrible. And so, of course, we don't want that to see that. No one gets married thinking I'm going to be a single parent. But at the end of the day, that's what we're dealt with. And so we scratch our heads and we go, how can we improve those statistics? But when we look at just a single parent family that has a father in the home, well, those metrics start to change. In fact, there's no difference between a single parent household where the dad is in the home and a nuclear family. It seems as though because identity is still in place for the kids, it doesn't have all of those detrimental ill health effects or consequences of a family breaking apart. Now, that's fascinating to me because it doesn't say, well, men are much better parents than women. No, it's an indictment on men. It's like, where are these men and why are they ejecting out of the lives of their children when this is so crucial for our kids when it comes to the development of their identity?
So with identity, right? I love the way you said it in the beginning. Identity, purpose, values, who I am, why I'm here, you said why I'm valuable, right?
Correct. Yep.
But with identity, understanding who I am, will you go into that a little bit deeper? What are the things that someone should know about themselves as it relates to identity? What are some of those things that my father would say to me that help me know what my identity is?
Well, identity can be constituted by a whole host of different things. And oftentimes we, by default, just go with our feelings. And if I feel a particular way, then that must be what I'm going to be lured towards. For example, I am a vanilla ice cream lover. It must be part of my identity because I love vanilla more than strawberry and chocolate. But in actual fact, feelings can be faulty and that doesn't form my identity. So when I feel a particular way, whether it be in my sexuality or my nationality, or, well, once again, that's not real identity. So we don't want to cluster a person by their external characteristics, but rather by their internal convictions. And that's the role that a father often plays with leadership, that I'm not just nurturing your feelings so that you have a happy life. No. The last thing I want is for my child to just be happy. No, I don't want that as a father. I want them to be disciplined. I want them to have a vision for their life. I want them to have a missional mandate, a purpose. And that purpose is not about themselves. It's about taking their gifts, skills, talents, opportunities, resources, and making a valuable contribution to the world in which they live. I'm gonna raise a society influencer, an impact or a change maker. And so I'm forging and fashioning this young person through discipline and through hard things. And as they go through hard things, they're going to learn great lessons. So I'm not going to protect them from those hard things, which oftentimes another spouse might want to do because, well, it's hard for them. And I don't want them to experience those unhelpful emotions that go along with it. And so that's why it's so important to have that balance between mum and dad, the nurturer and the leader who's able to push, and then somebody to pick up the pieces when it falls apart.
I know how my parents spoke a ton into my life, and we'll hear a little bit about that more on the next episode. But can you talk about how identity and purpose play together? What's the connection between the two?
Yeah, they're all three are interconnected because if you know who you are, it's not until you really discover who you are and whose you are that you discover why you're here. So a vehicle is made by a manufacturer and it has a particular branding or identity on it. And with that branding, we know what the purpose of a McLaren car is. It might be different from a Mazda bus. The bus is going to be purposeful in carrying and transporting people and goods, whereas the McLaren, that's going to have a whole other purpose. And so based on the manufacturer, based on the identity, we're going to discover, what is its utility? And when we discover its utility, we discover its value. Well, it's valuable to be able to transport people, or it's valuable to be able to go fast and fulfill its unique function. But when it comes to human beings, thank God we're not just a vehicle, we're not just a car. We are able to make a contribution to the life of somebody else. And when I'm making a valuable contribution, well, value is the same as the term worth. Self-worth is the same as the term self-esteem, and self-esteem is the pathway to self-confidence. So that's why these three essential elements are important for mental health and emotional well-being.
Will you give that pathway one more time?
So we've got identity, purpose, and value. And so when we are making a valuable contribution using our gifts, skills, talents, resources, opportunities to the life of somebody else, that right there is purpose. I'm making a purposeful contribution. But if I'm making a valuable, purposeful contribution, well, value is the same as worth. And self-worth is the same as self-esteem. And self-esteem is the pathway to self-confidence.
Yeah, my parents, one of the things they always said to me was that God has a great plan for your life, which was telling me that there is a great purpose for me. But I feel like that also pushed me and informed me in my, like, not necessarily telling me what my identity was, but that I felt like who I am was a part of the purpose that I had to play. And so there's things that I needed to figure out about myself or discover because God has a great plan for me.
That's it. And the beautiful thing is, because of the ups and downs of life, because of the challenges and the mistakes we'll make, we continue to fashion and forge our identity all of the time. And so sometimes people say, well, I am this particular personality type, and we'll, do a test and they'll put us into a category, and we'll go, well, that's just my gifting. And so I don't have the gifting for that. And we shy away from those things. Hang on, no. The Father comes along and says, I don't care if you've got a gifting for that, or if you don't have a gifting for washing the bathroom or cleaning the toilet. That's what you're going to be doing. And so because of those hard things forcing us to stretch outside of our comfort zone, we continue to fashion and forge who we ultimately are.
Can you speak to all of these elements maybe at some different ages? For someone who has kids 5 years old and under, what are the things that they need to be doing? Between 5 and 10, what are some of the things that they need to be doing or saying? Will you talk about that?
Well, it's interesting because mums and dads have different relational dynamics with their kids at different ages and stages, and oftentimes it's reversed. And so we might have a young boy who looks up to his mum and says, Mum, will you marry me? I love you so much. I want to spend an eternity with you. And it's so delightful. And of course, dads in that moment might be momentarily jealous, like, well, hey, what are you talking about? And okay, I don't want to marry you, but like it seems as though you love her more than you love me, and all that insecurity. But the thing is, there's a shift that's going to come. But the shift doesn't come in the way in which we often expect it or want it. The shift is not, oh, there's going to be a time, maybe prepubescent boy, when he reaches about that 12, that 11, 12 age mark, he's going to turn his attention to me and he's going to think dad's a superhero. No, those days have already gone. He will, however, be watching you. He will be listening to you talking. He might not show any visual expression on his face or any verbal confirmation that he agrees or disagrees with what you say, but when you're at the dinner table and you're talking about, you won't believe what happened to me at work today, and you describe some problem, well, the boy might be quite silent, but he is actively listening. How did dad solve this problem? And so dad's now forming a bit of a blueprint for that son, and the same is true with his daughter. Research shows that the relationship between dad and daughter sets up a blueprint in terms of identity and relational engagement for that young girl's future marriage. So the quality of the relationship between dad and daughter is emulated or mirrored in the kind of relationship that she's going to have in the future with her husband. And right there, that is scary. I've done 15 years worth of marriage training around the world. If I could dial back the clock, I would change it all. I would do 15 years worth of parenting, specifically focusing on fathers and the important role that they have so as to eliminate and prevent the dysfunction. I don't want to counsel people who are broken because there was a dad somewhere in the background who wasn't doing his job properly. We need to step up, dads, because we play such an important role when it comes to forging identity in our young people, not just now, but in their future as well.
Amen to that.
What age does that start to become a little bit more solidified for children?
Well, there's no set hard fast rule that once the clock ticks over and they
Sure.
become 7, for example, they all of a sudden, they're going to make a shift. But we do generally use guidelines of brain development. So prior to around about the age of 7, and once again, depending on the developmental nature of that child, we would say the child has very concrete thinking, so very black and white in their view. So mum is I want to marry her, dad, he's the superhero, and I just think the world of them. It's very black and white. But once that age ticks into the cognitive abstract way of thinking, there's a greater maturity. Cognition starts. So a child's able to reason more. And that's why oftentimes as parenting, parents are asking the question, do I smack or do I not smack? And what are the consequences of that? And, there's a lot of taboo around that. Well, after around about the age of 7, there's a new way of thinking for that child. You can actually reason with the child more like a sophisticated, intelligent adult than, say, for example, an animal where you can give the animal a treat, a reward, or a punishment for doing the right thing. And so we would do well to shift in our parenting at that particular phase. But then there's another phase, and the second phase is that prepubescent years as we go into the frontal lobe starts to come online, the volume starts to be turned up, if you will. So logical, rational thinking, executive functioning starts to take place. And I say starts to take place
Yeah.
in the adolescent years and continues all the way through to our mid-20s before it's fully matured and developed. And so those are the pivotal moments in a child's life where they might have shifts.
Are there any, as it relates to, children having an identity and a purpose and understanding values, are there any red flags, so to speak, or are there also any positive indicators? It's like, if your son is 17 years old and he's still not putting on muscle and his voice isn't changing, there'd be some health concerns there, right? In the same way, what are maybe some positive or negative indicators that parents could look for that my children are establishing a firm identity and purpose?
Well, rather than look for those indicators, oftentimes because that will be too late. If you're looking now and you're thinking, oh, they're not doing that, maybe I should do something. Well, here's the deal. The best time to parent a 13-year-old is when they're 10.
Yeah.
And the best time to parent a 10-year-old is when they're 7. And so
Yes.
if you're looking at your 17-year-old, like you said, or your 16-year-old, and you go, a few years ago, they were amazing. And now this rebellious teenager, like, what can I do? Well, what you can do is plan for the future for when they're 19.
Yeah.
So it often takes about a 3-year investment of parenting before we see the fruit come out of it, which is why instead of looking for the indicators, instead of always looking for the signs and the symptoms, no, let's create the future. Let's plan for those signs and symptoms and evaluate them as we go based on us, not on what we see in them. So how am I doing? What are the signs and symptoms that I'm actually instilling core values in my young person? I don't want to just focus on the what in terms of their behavior. I want to focus on the who. So I don't want to just, be concerned about what they're doing. I want to be concerned about who they're becoming, because this is identity. And so therefore I'm going to parent this child in such a way that's not exclusively focused on behavior.
Yes.
All too often when it comes to parenting, it's like behavior management. How do I just get my kid to do what I want them to do and when I want them to do it without complaining? Well, if there was a pill for that, we'd all be, dishing those pills out, but there's not. And so we have to make an investment, and the investment comes first in relationships. So here's a key core characteristic that we can all take to the bank. And that is that rules before relationships results in resentment and rebellion. But relationships before the rules results in respect. And respect is the holy grail of parenting in the 21st century.
Man, that's amazing, Dr. Robi. That's so well said. I've learned so much from Pastor Keith, and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm, my learner is firing on all cylinders, and I'm always looking for like the practical things. And one of the things I've observed from Pastor Keith, because you're talking about they get it from their dads, and our podcast is primarily male listeners, and it's very much designed that way. Like, we have a heart for men. That's who Garrett and I are called to serve, and that's who we'll serve for the rest of our lives. But very much so, like, when you talk about it from identity coming from the father, and you talk about some of those things, like he's listening at an older age, but so much of what I've learned from Pastor Keith is to talk to who the person is. And and Garrett's mentioned this so many times that his parents would say, that's not what an Uncle Bach does. And so I say that to my kids all the time, like, hey, you're a surface. This is what we do. Or I'll talk to them, I'll be like, hey, you're acting like this right now, when actually, you're really strong. To kind of show them how they're acting outside of who they really are. I mean, so I think that's practical. I'd love to hear your own thinking on that, or if there's any other sort of, because you just talked about the relationship and the importance of that, and I think that's such a valuable nugget. But if there's any other sort of practical ways for fathers to,
what are the inputs, so
Yeah.
to speak?
Great question. Look, once again, I've learned so much from Pastor Keith, and I remember sitting him down once saying, by all intents and purposes and qualifications, I'm a parenting expert. I've got parenting programs, but what I observe in you, I feel like I'm a novice, like a beginner, like I know nothing, and I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful for Pastor
Yeah.
Keith, and especially his mandate on core values. And so when we talk about parenting the who instead of the what, we can actually parent the core value or parent the intent. So this is a really good one. So dads, rather than always looking for, did my child do what I asked them to do when I said, hey, be careful not to, when playing, not to knock this glass of water over because it's got my important documents below. And if the boys are, playing and one accidentally knocks the glass over and the dad walks in, well, the stereotypical dad blows his stack. How many times do I have to tell you? I told you to not. And, whoa, just time out, dad, because we've got to parent the intent. Did they intend to knock the glass over? No. Could they have been more careful when you gave them the instruction? Probably. But we're not actually going to, rouse on this child because what happened was accidental. It wasn't actually intended to spill over that water. And so we're going to change the way in which we parent through leadership now to be able to say, hey, here's the deal. When I give an instruction and I say, be careful about something, I know you didn't intend to spill the water on these papers, but now it's spilt and there's a consequence for that. But with calm modality, I'm going to speak into who it is that you could now become. So when I give you an instruction, I want you to ask yourself, what's the core value of excellence in which I could engage this? Great, because this is my dad's heart's desire that we don't, damage his papers. We're going to take our game into the next room over there. So it's preemptive and proactive. The way in which we parent with core values when our child is in trouble at any time, irrespective of what they've done, is to not ask them, what behavior did you do wrong? Which family rule did you break? But rather to ask the child, which family core value did you let yourself down on right now? Because this is all about the child. I love Pastor Keith's mandate that at the end of correcting any child, the child is required to say something and it's not sorry. The child is required to say, thank you for correcting me and helping me be better. Once again, doubling down on the fact that the whole purpose of correction is to forge and form your identity. Thank you for correcting me to help me be better, rather than I'm sorry that I did something that hurt you, disappointed you, made you angry. No. All parenting is about forming, fashioning, and shaping this child so that they can be set up for success.
Yeah.
So good.
So good. Now, I want to rewind back a little bit because you talked about the importance of fathers and you gave those stats, which is just, it's amazing to hear those stats. But clearly mothers have a very important role. God made it man and woman for a reason. So can you go into some of the roles and the parts, the elements that the mom adds into the child development as well?
Well, as we said before, mum is there as stereotypically as the nurturer. And so when the child does injure themselves and they run right past dad to mum into mum's loving arms, that builds empathy within the child. And empathy is one of the most important elements for healthy relational engagement in the future down the track. And so when mums are able to communicate to a child this unconditional love. That's why we often see the anecdotal observations of inmates in prison. I think it was Hallmark greeting cards who had that experience where they thought, well, let's give all the inmates an opportunity to write a greeting card to their mum on Mother's Day, and it was so successful they had to truckload, semi-trailer loads more of these greeting cards because they ran out. It was so popular, and so they thought, wow, what a great idea! Let's repeat it on Father's Day. And less than 2% of inmates came forward to write a card to their dad, and that speaks volumes of the relationship between mums and dads and their kids, especially, firstly, mum, primary nurture, unconditional love. I'm in prison. I've committed crime, and yet my mum still loves me unconditionally. So I have that bond and that connection, that nurture. But dad, where's dad in the picture? What does that say about the relationship between criminals and their fathers? So we need to be able to have that empathy so that we can engage. And where do we get that from? We get it from our mums. And so mums play such an incredible role. And if we don't have that dynamic, and if we don't have that empathy, we become psychopaths. We become narcissists where it's all about me and I don't care about anybody else.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like that empathy, obviously, you talked about how important that is for relational skills. That's going to be where a lot of the emotional intelligence develops. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that, or is that separate to?
Yeah, look, emotional intelligence and social awareness, they're lifelong skills that we're going to develop, often not just from mum, and the development of empathy, but through every relationship that I have and every heartbreak that I have. So every difficulty that I go through, I'm going to have to ask the question, what can I learn from this? How can I self-reflect? Instead of just pointing the finger and blaming somebody else, we actually have to stop and ask the question, okay, so how could I have been more sensitive? How could I have been more socially or emotionally aware of what the other person was going through? So every relationship we have is going to be helping to teach us if we have a spirit of humility and a willingness to learn. I want to have a teachable spirit in every relationship that I have, because I'm not perfect and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to step on people's toes. I'm going to offend people. I'm going to do the wrong thing. And so every time there's an interaction that's not positive, it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah, will you talk about that just a little bit more? Humility and parenting.
Yeah. Well, we have this a lot of insecurity when it comes to parenting, and inferiority, and it's interesting because the word inferiority is a direction of fear. Where's the direction? Inward,
Yeah.
in fear, orientation, if you will. And why? Because we're comparing ourselves sideways. And so we want to be seen as the good parent who's doing a good job because our identity is on the line. We've
Yeah.
got caught up in the fact that how my child behaves reflects on me. And this is especially true for pastors and for psychologists who are supposed to have it all together, aren't they? And clearly know our boys will be boys and our girls will be girls, and they make mistakes from time to time. And so when we have a sense of security within ourselves to be able to say, all right, I'm not going to parent you so that you make me look good. I'm not going to parent you so that you make no mistakes so that I can walk away with and it's not just that I look good. It's just that I don't look bad. Just don't make me look bad. So whether it be on the stage, in the pulpit, or whether it be in the shopping center when our child is having a meltdown because they want a lolly, we become so insecure. But if we were to humble ourselves and say, you know what, I'm not the perfect parent, and guess what, there is no such thing. And yes, I may have made mistakes, and so did everybody else. Let me just be the kind of parent that has a responsibility today, and let me fulfill that responsibility. Oftentimes, when we make mistakes, we start to point fingers or make excuses. Look, even God failed as a parent. Look, Adam and Eve, they rebelled in the garden. So, like, if God's kids failed, then I'm okay too. Well, hang on, wait just a second. No. God never failed.
Yeah.
God instituted a rule and a consequence, which is what is required. Every time we give a rule, there has to be a consequence to it. If you eat that fruit, you'll die. And he followed through on his consequence with great grace, extending that period to give them a full life before it comes to an end. But he followed through. He was a great parent. What's my responsibility to follow through today? And dads especially, we don't like parenting. It's so complicated. But think of parenting like football, or like ice hockey, or like basketball. There is always a referee on the court or on the field, and all we do is enforce the pre-established rules because they have consequences. And if you score a goal, we give a point. And if there's a foul, or if there's an offside, or if there's a fumbled ball, or we blow the whistle, and once again we enforce the consequence. We never shout at the players. We never say, "How many times do I have to tell you?"
Right.
Those words don't exist from the referee. The referee never changes their mind midway through call that it was offside, and then the players coming up, "It wasn't offside. I was there. I saw." "Oh, well, okay, then play it." No, that will never happen, because the crowd will lynch the referee at the end of that game. The referee is there just to simply uphold the pre-established rules and consequences, and we would do well to learn from that in an emotional way. And if the kids really are going off the Richter scale, break out a yellow or a red card, and which symbolizes even greater consequences. And guess what? Kids actually work very well with such symbols. But let's not just focus on the negative. Let's break out a green card as well,
Yeah.
and bust them for doing something great, where we can articulate, this is what I saw you do, and so actually describe it. This is why it's so important. And lastly, this is how it makes me feel. Once again, building that sense of empathy in their identity.
What you said there on humility, I feel like humility is a foundation or guides the purpose of the parent. Because with humility, you realize, okay, the parenting's not about me. I'm parenting you for maturity. When you don't have humility, then it's about you.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to put you on the spot here. You know, if humility is a foundational quality for parenting purpose properly, are there any foundational qualities that you would say go along with identity or values?
Well, think of it when I unpack identity and values for my kids, and especially in the context of humility, it might sound like an oxymoron, but I actually describe it as superhero powers. So
Yeah.
it doesn't sound very humbling, but really that's what they are. And so when I say to my kids, "Hey, you are being fashion formed. You're like a young Superman. You're being groomed to be a superhero." Now, not just having superpowers, but having superhero powers. So Superman is not a superhero because he's able to jump over a building in a single bound, or because he can with lightning bolts out of his eyes blast through rock or steel. No, his superpower is put to the test when the football game is tied, and it's the final kick and it's the last few seconds of the game, and this is the moment, and in that moment, as his team is about to win, he hears ah, and there's a girl falling from the bridge 6 miles away, and he's confronted with a choice now. What do I do? Do I self-sacrifice and go and save the girl, or do I watch the final winning kick of the game because my team is about to win? And this is where the humility kicks in. So when I deny myself, because this is not about me, and I self-sacrifice and I go and rescue that girl, that's what makes me a hero, because my superpowers could make me a supervillain.
Right.
So the difference between a supervillain and superhero powers is the character, the core values, and that's what helps fashion and form the child's identity.
Oh, so good.
So yeah, that's amazing. So I only have two more questions for you, Dr. Robi. But I just want to kind of revisit some of what you're saying for people that are listening to this and going like, wow, they're so good. Maybe they don't have a notepad, they're working out, they're driving, whatever. If I could summarize, some of the things that you've said is, number one, and we didn't say it this blatantly, you got to lead yourself. Because you talked about what he's watching you, dad, and you're talking about how you're solving these problems. If you're like going, hey, we're integritous people, and you're talking about how you were able to slip one past, this guy because he wasn't looking, guess what? You're undoing all the stuff that you're putting in.
Or if you're not modeling grit.
Right. Yeah. If you're not modeling anything that you would like in your kids, it's going to be really hard because they're horrible interpreters but wonderful imitators, right? So they're going to be looking at you, and you need to know that. So I would say that would be one. Two, you talked about how important it is to really speak into them from a place of identity around values. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you don't have core values, I think a solid takeaway from this episode would be you need to go develop some core values, and that's a whole nother thing. We have episodes on that. We can talk about that a whole nother time. And then I would say three, you talked about the example of God, who's always the example in everything. And you said he sets a consequence and he follows through, and that's why he was the perfect parent. And I've never thought about it like that, but that is brilliant. I've noticed the consequence, and that's what he did, because you see it in the covenant in the Old Testament with the Hebrews, and over again he's faithful to his word. But like how that's one of the things I always saw in parents is I'm like, that kid doesn't believe you. When you're sitting there saying like, if you don't do this, it's like that kid knows you're not going to do that.
I've seen multiple parenting psychologists say that is the most important thing, is that you always keep your threats.
Right. Oh. Just be consequences, G. This isn't war,
Well, I mean, a threat is just to say, hey, if you don't clean your room, you're going to be grounded.
Oh, I'm forming 6 new interests for our next parenting episode, thanks to your threats. Okay, so 2 more questions, and one of them is sort of just, I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. So you've done so much work with families, as we alluded to in your bio. What's the most common issue that you see? Like the most common thing that gets brought to you from a familial parenting standpoint that you have to deal with and correct, and how do you go about that?
Well, I think, it's hard to broad brush stroke and categorize, but one of the common themes that we see in parenting is that we are parenting the outcome and not the intention. And we parent the outcome because I think that parenting is all about behavior or behavior management. I couldn't think of anything worse than engaging in behavior management day in, day out. To me, behavior management is like, it's like shoveling snow. Now it doesn't
Right.
snow so much in Texas,
Right.
nor in Cambodia, where I find myself this week. But in the Northern Hemisphere, if it snows, you can't get your car out of the garage. So
Right.
you've got to go manage that situation. So you get your shovel out and you're shoveling the snow, and you stand back and you go, look what I have done. I have created space. But the problem is, tonight it's going to snow again. And so you have to manage that situation over and over again. So when I think of parenting, I want to pursue seasonal change. I don't want to just manage their behavior. I want to influence their behavior and go into a brand new identity. What's the new identity? It's called springtime. It's called summertime. And where things start to bloom and things start to grow. And so the way in which we can do that is to focus and recognize that it's not just about the behavior, it's about the underlying antecedents of the behavior. If there is no core value, there's no compass. And so to be able to embrace these core values, it sets the child on a particular direction. So that's probably one of the most common things that I see. There is no direction, there's no mission. It's like that age-old statement, submission. No one wants to submit to anyone. Wives don't want to submit to husbands. Children don't want to submit to their parents. That's because we don't understand what submission is. Submission is broken into two different parts, sub and mission. A submarine is a vehicle that travels under the marine or under the water. So when it comes to submission, it's coming under the mission. It's not sub man, it's not sub dad, it's not sub mum, it's sub mission. So what's the mission, family? And if we don't have a mission, we ain't going nowhere. And so, to reorient that and say, what are these family core values? What are these superhero powers? And I don't know what they are in your family, but we encourage families to have no less than 3 and no more than 5. So it gets too complicated after that, So honor, attitude, gratitude, generosity, excellence, whatever your core values are. When I parent the child now, I'm parenting based on those core tenets. This is who we are. We are an honorable family. Even when somebody dishonors us, we don't honor them because they're honorable. We honor them because we are honorable. This is our superhero power and core value. And that brings direction.
Man, I feel like I could just ask you anything and you would give like 17 nuggets. I'm just the importance of vision. No, but seriously, the importance of vision and mission. And once again, another thing I learned from Pastor Keith, like having a family mission statement. I'd never heard of that before. We have one. It's on our wall. We talk to our kids about it all the time. They know why surfaces exist on the earth. And they know it's not about them. And it's just, I just think about that. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this. What I've observed, and it's not, a super great observation. I think it's fairly obvious, but like most people will only rise to the level of what they see. And if you only see what's in your small little bubble around you, you're going to be like, hey, I'm doing pretty great because this person is. Well, then, if you're not exposed to great parenting and great family, whatever you've seen is like the top of the pops, right? It's like, I'm winning. And so
thought I was an athlete until I met one.
Yeah, I thought I was a great athlete, and then I went and met real ones, and I was like, oh, I'm actually not even average, right? And it's funny, but it's also, how many people are really proud of parenting, or how many people are like, are really saying like, look, this is this, and putting their life on display as parents. And so it's like we wanted to get you on and get Garrett's parents on to hopefully help, because in my own life, my parents did so many things wonderful, and it's not a complaint at all. But there were so many things that they didn't have from their parents. So how are they going to teach them? And now I'm getting to see some of the people that I'm around here in Texas. I'm just so grateful. So it's like I want to share that with people, because it really is. It's the whole thing of when you see something, now you can believe it's possible. And then if you believe it's possible, now you're going to take action. And if you take action, it's amazing what happens. So
unless we're intimidated by it, and then we fall apart. But that's where the pride kicks in. Let's get rid of the pride. Like I love what you said before, Garrett. Humility. Let me be inspired by other parents, not intimidated and go, oh, I don't measure up.
Okay. Well, I got one last question, and I know you got to get going. Just so y'all know, Dr. Robi's up like first thing in the morning. It's approaching 7 a.m. where he's at. He got up and got on with us at 6 a.m. He looks amazing if you're watching us on YouTube. I mean, the hair is perfect. Unbelievable how you wake up like that, He said he didn't even drink coffee. He just woke up and had a large glass of awesomeness, and here he is. But last question, Dr. Robi. This is really for people may listen, they may take notes. I hope they do. I hope they take action, because you've given so many gems. But if you could choose just one thing, right? This is one of those like radio questions. If you could choose one thing for a parent to instill in their kids psychologically, what would that be?
Maybe not psychologically, maybe spiritually. Look, I think that if my child has a good relationship with their heavenly father, not just their earthly father, they're in good standing for success. For whatever mistakes I may have made, they can go to him for healing. And as I pray with my kids, one of the things I want to instill in them is that they have their own independent relationship with God. So it's not just my values that are being passed on to them or being pushed onto them, but to encourage them and nurture that within themselves. If I did nothing else in parenting but just nurtured their own relationship with God, through prayer, through discussions, going out in nature, asking hard questions, asking those big questions that we talked about today. So why do you think that you are here on this planet? And where do you think you came from? And why do you think you're here? And where do you think you're going, after this? And to be able to, explore those bigger questions, if they have a relationship, a solid relationship with God, well, right there, that is a foundation that is beyond anything that as a parent that I could do. That would be my number one. If there was only one, that would probably be it.
Well answered. And yeah, man, I so appreciate you. G, is there anything else you want to?
No, that was a fantastic answer for us to end on. So I won't add anything.
Dr. Robi, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing Garrett ask his 3-year-old why she's here as soon as we get out of here. So that's going to be fun. But thank you so much, man. You're such a blessing just in general, just as a person. I always love being around you. But what a gift you are to people, man. So, guys, we're going to link to the first episode. We're going to link to Dr. Robi's website. He's, you're just a wealth of blessing and wisdom. And so I appreciate you coming on here. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we head out, but.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, not just for having me on, but for what you do. This podcast actually is not just another, heads talking, junk, but it makes an impact. I ran into somebody in Papua New Guinea, of all places, who said, "Oh, I was listening to my favorite podcast, The Impossible Life, and you came on," and I'm like, "Wait, you listen to The Impossible Life? Like you guys are global." And so I just want to cheer you on for what you're doing. You are making an impact, especially in the lives of men. And so, we need this. Championing your cause. Good on you guys. Keep going.
Praise God, man. We're on the same mission. That's amazing. It just also makes me realize that Spotify's telling the truth whenever they talk about all these different places you're at. That's incredible. Well, hey, have a wonderful time in Cambodia. We'll look forward to talking to you again and hopefully seeing you out here in the great state of Texas soon.
God bless you guys. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robi.